Hi campers, it's time to put patch pockets on the front of our garment. We're going to use those five-sided sort of kangaroo style pockets. Obviously the pockets are going to be split because we've got a zipper down the middle. So there are going to be two of them, but they're going to be in that kangaroo style. Okay. How do we do this? Well, we're going to use some familiar tools and we're going to use some new ones. So let's start with the familiar tools. First, we're going to draw the pocket. And to draw the pocket, we're going to use this tool here, which you've seen before. This is the internal polygon line tool. Okay, I'm using this because my pockets are not rectangular. If they're rectangular pockets, I could use the rectangle tool. In this case, I'm going to use the polygon line tool, and I'm going to start drawing on my 2D pattern. It really doesn't matter where I start drawing. I'm just going to come back to the same point at the end. So let's start drawing some lines on this garment. And keep in mind, at this point, we're just drawing lines. All right, so I will click once and I can start drawing a line. And maybe I want it to go, maybe I want a nice tall pocket. Let's make like roughly 8.5-inch pocket. There we go. And then I'm going to bring it over a little bit, usually a straight top. And then I'm going to have the spot where you stick your hand in, which is here. And we want to make sure that that's decently sized so I can actually get my hand in it. And click here. And then I'm going to come back down. As you're coming back down, you notice when I hit this level where I am level with the bottom of this polygon, not only is my mouse going to jump to that point, but I'm also going to get these pink lines. The pink lines are indicators that this point right here is directly under the point above and directly to the right of the point to the right. Okay, so whenever you move around and you see those pink lines, you know you are geometrically in the right position, okay, or in the correct position. So I'm going to click to put a point there, and then the final point will rest right on top of the original. You must be right on top of the original. Click there. Give it a minute. It will generate, oops, I clicked twice, sorry. It will generate my patch pocket. Okay. So it has generated a line, okay? And I've got lines on my garment. At this point, that's all I have are lines drawn on my garment. Do I like those patch pockets? Looking at the model over there, they look pretty good. They look pretty good. I could modify them if I want, but I think they're fairly good. Okay, so let's take those lines and let's use them to make a new piece. In this case, I want to use the transform pattern tool. Remember I told you these two tools, I keep getting them mixed up. But this transform pattern is when you want to do something with whole pattern pieces, not just like changing one piece. You want to make a whole piece. So in the transform pattern tool, I'm going to select that and I'm going to move this up a little bit so that I can see what I'm doing. I can now right click on my internal shape. And one of the options that I get is clone as pattern. Okay, there's clone as pattern and there's clone as pattern with sewing. In this case, I just want to clone as pattern. What do they mean by clone? They mean make a copy of it. And how am I going to make the copy? As a new pattern piece. So that's what I'm doing there. So if I click clone as pattern, you notice now there's this sort of yellow polygon attached to my mouse, and I can put it wherever I want. I'm just going to put it here below the shirt and click there. And now I have a new pattern piece. Okay, if you look at the 3D window, here it is. It's floating in midair. It's just sort of sitting there. Okay, at this point, if I were to turn gravity on, I'm not going to, but if I were to turn gravity on, that piece of fabric floating in midair would just fall on the floor because it's not connected to anything. It's not connected yet, okay? Before we connect it, we're going to do a couple of other things. To make things easy on us, we're going to duplicate this pocket. We're going to make a mirrored, symmetric piece so that what happens to one happens to the other, so that the other pocket is present. Okay? So again, I have the transform pattern tool on. I'm going to right click my new piece And on my new piece, I'm going to choose symmetric pattern. What am I doing? I'm making a symmetric piece, and I will put it right here. Again, it's attached to my mouse until I click where I want it to go, and I'm going to put it right there, nice and neat. Okay. So I have two new pieces in my 2D window. I have two new pieces floating in midair on my 3D window. We're in good shape. We have two new pockets that are there. Okay. What's the last thing we have to do? Well, we have to sew the pocket to the garment. And you might be wondering why we didn't clone and sew at the same time. And the reason why is because this hand opening here has to be unsewn. That piece there has to be open so you can get your hand in it. So we're going to sew it manually. We're going to use a tool called segment sewing. So up here in the right, we've got the edit sewing tool. We're not going to use that. Next one down, segment sewing. This is what we want. What this does is sews one whole seam or segment to another whole seam or segment. So I'm going to choose that tool. Okay, it's got a little bit of a wonky feel to it at first. As you're mousing over, you'll see it'll attach itself to different seams, and it will attach itself to different lines. Okay, and you notice there's this little hatch mark on it. That hatch mark is important because it tells you the directionality of the sewing. If I were to choose to sew the top of the pocket to this line here, I want to make sure that the hash marks are on the same side so I get nice straight sewing lines. I'm going to show you what that looks like when you don't do that. Okay, so here's what not to do. Hatch mark is on the left. I click there. And then I come down here. Hatch mark is on the right. I click here. And look at those sewing lines, how they're crossed. Look at the sewing lines over here in the 3D model, how they're crossed. If I were to sew that, it's going to bunch all up like crazy because I'm sewing the right side of the pocket to the left side of the garment and vice versa. I don't want to do that. I am going to undo. Remember, undo is my friend. All right, let's do it correctly. This segment with the hatch on the left goes to this segment with the hatch on the left. Nice straight sewing lines. And I can always watch over here in the 3D window to see what's going on. Okay. Again, at the top here, hatch on the left or right doesn't matter as long as it's in the same position when you get to the pocket. So click there, click here, nice straight sewing lines. Now I'm going to take a minute to adjust my 3D window because I really want to see what's going on here. And I'm going to move both of these pattern pieces up so I can more clearly see what's going on with them. Okay, that will help. All right. Back to my sewing. Segment sewing tool. What else do I need to sew? I need to sew this side to this side. There we go. And I can see nice straight sewing lines. They might be going through the fabric at this point, but they're nice and straight. I need to sew the bottom to the bottom. And then if I were to rotate this, I can see that that's sewing correctly. Yay. Okay. I'm going to turn it this way. All right. And then segment sewing, left side to left side. All right. So if I look over here in my 3D window and I pull this guy out so I can see what he's doing, I can see that the top, the inside, the bottom, and the outside are all sewn, and the hand area is not sewn. That's exactly what I want. I'm good with that. Let's do the same thing to the left patch pocket. Well, technically, I guess it's the model's right, but segment sewing, what have I got sewn so far? The top to the top. So let's sew the inside to the inside, making sure those hashtags line up. Let's sew the bottom to the bottom, and let's sew the outside to the outside, and then go over here and look at my 3D model and make sure that all the sewing lines are nice and straight, and they are all nice and straight. Wonderful. My patch pockets are now sewn to the garment. Awesome. We can now turn on gravity. Loop, and there they are. And you notice they are sewn properly. I can pull that pocket open. Yay, right? But it does not open on any of the other sides. If I pull on the other sides, the rest of the garment comes with it. But if I pull on the non-sewn side, there it is. Right? Awesome. I think the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go back to my transform pattern tool so I can see my fabrics again and just make sure that these fabric pieces are matching the rest of my garment, because I'm fussy that way. If you would like contrasting pockets, knock yourself out. But that is the easiest way to do it. We draw the lines on the garment where we want the pocket to show up. We clone that polygon as a new pattern piece, make a symmetric copy of it, and then we sew that copy back onto the garment. And because we have already drawn the lines on the garment, we already have sewing lines to sew it to. So these lines also will print on your pattern when you print them to show you exactly where the pocket should be attached. That's everything we need in creating a patch pocket.